Any further apologies? There being none, would someone move that be sustained? Thank you. Seconder? Thank you. Put that to the table. All in favour, please say aye. I have no declarations of interest. Can we confirm the non-confidential minutes of the ordinary meeting, the 19th of October, and then secondly, the extraordinary meeting, the 13th of December? We'll do the October one first. Those that were here, would someone move? Thank you. Seconder? Put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Carried. The second one, the 19th or 13th of December. Someone who was here. Thank you. Seconder. Put that to the table. All in favour, please say aye. The contrary carried. We go to the action sheet. Any issues there? If not, we'll move on. No leave of absence, acknowledgements of tributes, public input. Extraordinary business, we have a late item, plus we have the draft land transport plan, the significance policy, and then we have the draft proposed regional public transport plan. Now, in order of approval, so I've been instructed, is that we move firstly the draft regional land transport plan, the significance policy. Someone care to move that? Thank you. Seconder? Thank you. Put that. Aye. Oh, Malcolm. That's approved. Now, draft regional land transport plan. It's the late item. Someone move that. Thank you. Seconder? Yes. Aye? No. Thank you. Aye? Do you want any discussion? Well, I'm going to move to the discussion after we've done that. Yep. It's approved. And in terms of the third one, do you want to do that now, or will we leave it after we've had a discussion on both those items? You're going to move it? No. All right. Aye. The item 10.2.
So the regional public transport plan is on page 20. So the regional public transport plan is on page 20 of your combined agenda.
Thank you. And the seconder? Thank you. I put that at the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. Now, we'll come back to the order as I was given. Draft regional land transport plan, the significance policy, which is on page, what did you say, David?
So significance policy is 14.
14.
So just while we're getting there in your agendas, the significance policy is for if we're looking to make any changes to the RLTP, this is how we rank and how we class whether or not something's significant under our RLTP. So we've had some guidance that we need to make sure that we have some more transport specific criteria be within our significance policy. And that's why the staff have made the recommendations around what it is, how do we determine something is significant, whether something that has interregional significance and what that looks like. So for an example of that, think of State Highway 2, which of course connects us to our neighbours to the south and north, and how we rank that for significance when things come through. And then if there's a variation to the regional land transport plan, which you're hopefully going to approve this afternoon as a draft. So during the course of an RLTP, when it's in practice, so for this one between 2018 and 2021, there can be changes that arise as part of the day-to-day operation. So we may choose to bring forward a project, or you may choose to take a project out depending on how things work. And it's when you would like that to be deemed up as significant. And when it's significant, that means that we have to make sure that there's criteria that we have met when we bring that to you, but then also for consultation with our community if we're making a significant change to the RLTP. And the last one, of course, is that it determines what significance expenditure is. And in the paper, we've proposed a threshold of anything over $5 million as being significant. So that's of a change in a project or an additional spend sitting inside. So that's where the proposal is at the moment. The Appendix 1 that starts on page 18 of your agenda outlines what the policy is and how we then use it there in detail.
I trust everyone's had the opportunity to read it. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, page 51 on that one of those reports, it said commented on poor drivers on our Gizzy bus, was it? Oh, sorry, I'm too far ahead. You're moving quick.
Anyone else got a comment?
Chair, just so a activity can potentially meet the threshold of significance if it's less than $5 million, but only if it meets the other criteria. Thank you.
Through the chair, yes.
Nothing further? Must be all happy with this, Dave. No? Yeah.
I'll take it.
No, we're right. Well, let's move forward. We move this? Yeah. The recommendations on page 14. Given they all seem to be very happy, can someone move those recommendations? Thank you.
Yes, I'll move it.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'll move it.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you. I'll put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary carried. Now let's move to the draft regional land transport plan, the late item. This here you've got, I guess, and it's a draft. Not many of you had the opportunity to have a good look at it. Is it much different to what was proposed before?
So through the chair, the draft regional land transport plan is, and for those of you on your electronic agenda, it was the item sent through as a late agenda, so it's not in the combined. The draft regional land transport plan is what we've been working on as staff in the background, and we've put things through to you as a committee as we've worked through those things. So it only contains the things that you are aware of that are in there. So there's been no significant changes since the last time that we've brought it through to you. We're happy to take any questions as it fits. This is for draft for consultation with our community. So this will feed out into the engagement process that we're about to enter into in March with our community for the long-term plan. And the long-term plan and the regional land transport plan will be consulted on at the same time. So it's for our community to give us feedback around the priorities that we've put in there. As you know, I suppose headlines for this one are the increase in expenditure for operational maintenance. So that has been put through. And the other big change for us is the increase in around how we fund our emergency works as well. So we've made greater provision for that going forward in this RLTP as well. So the projects that are there, that we've prioritised, the years that they're there, the team are here and we're happy to take questions on those and to hear from our community if they agree with the processes for where we've prioritised things and where we haven't.
Councillor. Yep.
Yes, because otherwise on the recording, no one can hear. We need the microphones on so that the public watching online can hear you. Otherwise, there's complete silence when you're speaking. So yes, it is important if you want to be heard by people who aren't in the room but who are watching online.
Is it policy that we are...
It's a technological issue. If your microphone's not on, your voice isn't picked up, so people online hear nothing when you speak.
welcome everybody listening. I'm quite happy for you all to hear. No, hey, look, honestly, what I have a concern about is that we're shuffling, and we do it all the time. It's part of what we have to do. We like our prioritisation of our budgets. You're saying we're prioritising, and I know over the years we've prioritised. Like some years ago, we had a priority with safety and but sitting here, I have no idea how that impacts on the overall picture, because there is no schedule of where that cost. Like we have a budget. We've got all these different activities in the roading budgets, and if we're going to say, well, we'll put money into one side or another, I don't know how that impacts on other activities. And really, I'd like to see some form of how or where that money is coming from. If it's new money, or whether it's been scheduled, it's been moved from other activities. And so is that possible for you to report? Well, no, it's not. Is it possible? It is possible for you to report, but I just think that we need some reporting around the big picture of the budget, and so that when you say, oh, we've asked to prioritise, and you mentioned a couple of things just a while ago, you prioritised, what were you saying you were prioritising? Mr. Wilson, what was the activities that you said you were prioritising in here?
So through the chair, that was around provision for extra maintenance, operational spend, and for emergency works.
Correct. Okay, and in this case, that obviously has to be done in that, but I still think that we need to be able to see the greater budget and schedules of where those monies in the whole of the roading budget.
Most of it's here, though,
so that we
councillor.
fully understand it.
Most of it's here, though, councillor.
Sorry, what's that?
Yeah, most of it's here.
Is that through our whole Gisborne district budget, like walkways and all those different things?
Yeah, it's all here. Yeah, it's all here.
And again, I'd like to see that a historical thing, to see the effects on how that, yeah, it's all right. It's all very well saying, giving us a year, but we want to see how it actually has affected other activities.
This is the roading budget, both the state highways and our network, as well as the other activities that the Regional Land Transport Committee is responsible for. I think, due respect, Councillor, they've done a good job putting this all together. It's pretty
I'm not saying
comprehensive.
they've done a good job. I'm just saying that I'm not questioning that. I just say that I sort of feel sometimes I'm a bit left a bit short on seeing a pattern of where money comes and goes from over time.
So through the chair, the proposed activities that we have contained in the RLTP have the detail for the next 3 years where the spends are going to be. The priorities of where they've sit in, we've worked through with this committee in the prioritisation process that we've been through in order to put the funding where we have. And that was part of the objectives and the framework that we agreed as a committee late last year, and that helped reflect where we were going to put the spends through. We can report to the committee the historical spends of where we have to date. I'm a little bit uncertain about where you mean when you say where the money has come from. We have our arrangements with the Transport Agency around our fare rates and the assistance there. The wider budgeting is through the long-term plan about what funding comes into the roading budgets and then what sits within the RLTP. So the RLT budget that we have proposed here is informed by the long-term plan budgets that we're setting with you as council.
Okay, can I just clarify the question then? Historically, we had a big reduction in the maintenance rates through those NOC contracts we signed up some years ago, and yet the budget remained. There was reprioritisation of that funding into other activities, and now, obviously, we need to up that maintenance thing again. It appears we need to do that, which of course is what you're saying is happening and under the prioritisation. But when it would, just so we could just follow where those sequences go over years, and that's the sort of data I'd like to see. And I'm talking about our whole budget, because we're talking, and some of it's nothing to do with this committee only, because we have like our walls, our walkways, our pathways, our street lighting comes under the road budget. There's a whole lot of different budgets, and if we could break those down and we know exactly this last year, this is how we fund this year, the year before, that's how we fund it, and we can just see patterns, and we can see, and then we can satisfy ourselves that there is sufficient funding going into, and one isn't sacrificing funding for another, and this sort of thing. And that's the sort of detail I would like to see.
Through the chair, the budgets for the wider council are set by council.
Correct.
And it's the long-term plan where the councillors have decided to prioritise one area over another or not. And that's the long-term planning cycle, and that's the place where those, I suppose, trade-offs are made between one activity and another, where those finances go, whether it be into water, roading, parks and reserves, anything is done through the long-term plan process. That's the vehicle of where that happens. It's not through the RLTP. The RLTP is given the budgets from the long-term plan to then implement for the local share.
And I understand that, but I'm just bringing it, I know we're talking about prioritisation here though, with regard, and that does affect our RLTP figures and that. So I'm just asking if we can have that sort of clarity of detail that, anyhow, that's fine. I'll go off, I'll turn this thing on now. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that it has been put together based on workshop type sessions that we've had, but it did come to this meeting as a late item. And for those of us not on this committee who are interested enough to read it, it is one of life's little challenges to read it on a small screen. So I do think in future, or even still to come, it would be really good if we could workshop the final, as this is apparently going to be, at a future tairāwhiti or some future meeting where all of council, who all have an interest in our roads, could actually share this data. Because I'm looking at page 25 and we see that there's some program business cases funded to allow business cases to be identified to address transport issues to maximise value, blah, blah, blah. So none of that material we've really discussed in great length. So just to be able to workshop the total plan now that it's been put together, I do believe would be really helpful, because roading is so critical for this district and one of the issues we get into the most trouble about. So if that could be taken on board, that would be helpful, and a hard copy would certainly be appreciated by myself. Thank you.
Point in order. I'm fine with that request. Sorry, do you want to say something? Everyone else quite happy? Okay, well, yes.
Just a couple of things that I wanted to note. Firstly, the two items that Pat's just referred to are actually in the wrong years. The two items, the reds business cases, the funding's in the wrong years. The State Highway 2 one's actually in this financial year, and the State Highway 35 one is in the 18-19 year. So those two, but we can hopefully get that one corrected. Also, just note that we had the third workshop on the ITPP this morning, and so that's identified a whole list of areas and items for action, particular projects, roads and so on. And so that now is something that once we have that, the outcome of the workshop finalised, that we would want to look at how it's reflected in the RLTP. So that's something that through the consultation process, we're looking to see that happen.
Thank you. Supplementary then, can I just ask then, thanks very much for that information. So the workshop that we had back in January, like about 3 weeks ago. Was some of that material filtered into this document?
In terms of the issues the council has raised and what they wanted to see progress on, that's certainly informing everything that we do. But the level of detail in this probably doesn't reflect some of the specific items that council has raised.
Thank
It
you.
doesn't go down to the individual projects.
Let's go, councillor.
This late item when you mentioned before, I was unaware of it, and I see that's where the numbers you're referring to. So, having said that, that would go some way to what I'm asking for. Okay. Why? And it's such a big document. Why wasn't it sent out with the agenda? That would be the question I'd be asking. But anyhow, it doesn't matter. You're probably under pressure, so I won't carry on with that.
Well, I'm sorry if you feel I've put you under pressure. Yep.
The report was sent out electronically on the weekend, on Saturday morning, and a hard copy was left for you in the councillor lounge. You were informed by email earlier on in the week. So it was available in hard copy and electronic copy. Thank you.
So through the chair, if I can reassure the committee, the document that you have in front of you is material you have seen for the last probably 6-7 months as we've worked through the ALTP process. It follows the directions that you've given as a committee, and we apologise for the lateness of the delivery of it, but we were not going to set out a report that was substandard, so we wanted to make sure that we had it as close as we could before we sent it out to you. The draft RLTP that you discussed late in 2017 and the prioritisation of projects, the last time you saw those projects was in an Excel spreadsheet, and there's been a couple of workshops that we've had as a regional transport committee. If you remember the one that we had over in the Emerald building where we sat down and we talked through line by line what was there. And then we've also had that come back up to you again as a separate report. The bit that you've been waiting for our draft for consultation is the one that has it looking pretty for a start off, but then also has some of the things that need to be regionally significant in the front of it. So when we talk about our issues, we've talked about those as a committee a fair few times, but then it's also around those strategic objectives and the priority projects that you wanted to see put in and into this document. So the document is the amalgamation of that work that you've been doing. And like I said, we apologise for it coming through late, but we had to pull it together into a way that was coherent and pulled in all of the things that you had flagged up to us.
Just a question around on page 28, line 3 and 4 of the table. Industry participation in the funding. Now, I presume, and as Councillor Thompson, I guess it's partly too, we don't see the share of where the funding derives from. But I know we discussed that at some length at our last meeting about industry participation and bridge strengthening and the widening of the Arakihi Road. And I was just wondering if that still is a live topic.
So through the chair, one of the things that we've been talking about with industry in particular is the HPMV strengthening of bridges. And one of the things that we discussed again this morning with the industry was around where they wanted those to be. As we've given feedback to the committee, a lot of the transport and firms are not looking to go up to HPMV for the forestry routes because it's too hard to get those big trucks into a forestry road once you get up there. So there's no point upgrading the bridges. So they're okay with 50 max at the moment. We have had some people question around minor improvements where ratepayers won't be paying for the local share and where industry are keen to look at those. The probably most live example we have at the moment is, of course, with the council farm, Tauwhare Parae Holdings, where they're looking at the Wairangi Link Road and paying the local share component of that. Where we talk about that, the NZTA share, of course, is 62 cents, so they would have to come up with the other 38 cents out of every dollar for that. And I know that they're working through a business case for that. We've also had a couple of other forestry companies talk to us around minor improvements on some roads to help ease congestion. This is road widening, taking off corners and those things. So we are working through those processes, but it is a case by case as the industry bring those up with us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just a quick question. This is a fantastic report, great plan. Good to see everything itemised. Is there going to be a way that we can use this for benchmarking through the year? You know, as budgets are spent, can we keep track of them with being reports? I mean, in a similar format to this, even just under. I mean, even if it's done 6 monthly, so we can see where it's tracking and the money that's been invested. That would be great. The other question I've got is on page 25, port access, Eastland Port Access, 153,900 for this year. Is there a plan being tabled for that at this stage, or is this it's in the to be done basket?
So through the chair, yes, we can report on finances, and happy for the team to look at how we can give an itemised list as we work through the year. It's something that we're looking for the Assets and Infrastructure Committee as well. For the Eastland Port Access project, we're looking at how we're going to deliver that project going forward, and there are a range of different things that need to be investigated as part of that project. So we have the design that's been worked through with the working group that's there, and it's been shown what the preferred option is. However, we also still have to work through a process for us to actually make sure that we have the right connections that lead up to that intersection as well. And that's part of the wider piece of work that we need to do to inform, to make sure that we are making the right decision with that intersection. We have to make sure the roads leading up to it are the right ones as well.
Any further discussion or questions? Emma.
One final point that should be acknowledged is that the government's new government policy statement for transport will come out in draft form for consultation during March, which will be concurrent with this being out for consultation. So there will be a need to again look at that and identify whether that might have some impact on what gets prioritised through the way that funding is prioritised and allocated from the government's perspective. So just want people to be aware of that, and the signals have been communicated already by the Minister of what's going to be important, and I think for this region, the emphasis on safety, access for communities, regional economic development are all themes that work very well for this community. So I think that's actually going to fit quite well, but we will have to consider that.
Make some adjustments here. Thank you for that. Any further discussion or questions? If not, would someone move the recommendations on page 3? Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you. I'll put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. The contrary, carried.
Can I just ask one question which came up while that Transport Agency lady was speaking to us just now? On page 25, the last item, a way bridge, the Wayrite Regional Gisborne, and it has 3.015 million beside it, if I'm reading it correctly, in the 1920 year to improve way pits, to improve overweight detection. Are we, Gisborne District Council ratepayers, contributing the normal ratio to that project?
No, it's fully funded from the State Highway Fund.
Thank you very much. So supplementary, how can we tell, unless it's in a column further over that I failed to pick up, how can we tell which ones of these projects, line by line, are fully funded by NZTA or otherwise partially funded by us?
Both the fully funded by NZTA and Crown funded, which is a separate source, are in the State Highway table.
Right. It still says sorry, I'm sorry to be pedantic, but I'm sure we all want to know this. So top of that page 25 still says subsidised state highway. So how would we determine a difference? Because I imagine we're contributing to the Eastland Port access, as a question's been asked about that already.
So through the chair, if you'd like us to make it clearer through the heading, we can do that. The Port Access project is an NZTA project. It's not a local roads project. It's on the state highway that improvement will be made.
Right. Okay. So we're saying then we take from this that says subsidised state highway, all of that is 100% funded. That would be great, because if I couldn't work it out, I think there might be a few others that probably couldn't too. So that, if we can note that, that would be helpful. Because I didn't imagine we would be looking enthusiastically at paying $3 million for weighbridges. Thank you.
Just a brief question on page 37, the appendices, there's the key performance indicators by benefit. Are those, is the baseline for those measures available? And if it is, where is it available?
Dave?
Just confirm the question, was the baseline information available? Yeah, I'm sure we can provide it. It's just some of the details we'll work through. No. Yeah. We'll come back to you with that one.
Okay, the reason for asking was obviously part of the information for consultation would be where are we starting from and how would people know whether we make improvements.
We could ask at the action point.
So through the chair, just to follow up on that, the baseline indicators are set by the New Zealand Transport Agency, and a lot of the things around, so deaths or serious injuries by mode, we look at the national averages and then compare how we look against that regionally. We compare our statistics to then look at how that fits through.
Just a supplementary, so could that be made available as part of the consultation so that we could see where we're starting from as a community?
Yes.
Yes, Councillor.
I'd just like to support what Councillor Seymour, and it was basically what I was touching on before as well, to sort of just to know our costs in relative to as things progress through the years. But Councillor Seymour was probably stated it more clearly than what I originally my original attempt. It would be actually nice to have another line on here to show that ratio of funding so that we can actually see it, because it does vary through a lot of the different those line items. And again, we look at those line items, I think, goodness, you know, I'm thinking of ratepayers, where are the ratepayers at with this? And that's one of the things that I'm primarily thinking of. And unless we have that sort of identified, it's sort of hard to tell.
All good.
Through the chair, the Regional Land Transport Plan is for the state highway and the local road spend that we're going to be looking to spend for this period. And that's why you see it joined up in the way that it is. It's the way that an RLTP is put together. We can pull apart the council component for an interest payment that would sit to the side of this. But the way that we report this up, because it feeds into the National Land Transport Plan, and for the way that we've got it set up is to report it as one because of the way that it feeds into the system that it goes into. But I'm sure we can put a document together which shows the council split versus the NZTA split, if that's what the committee would like us to do, but it would sit to the side as an information paper.
Thank you, Worship. Got supplementary. That would probably, yeah, okay. That would.
No, I'm old.
Sorry, what did I say?
Is my time coming?
Worship.
Called me His Worship.
I went on jury. I was going to call you Jon. I was on jury service earlier in the week, and sorry. Okay, for that, in that case, I'd be happy with this, and maybe that a report that was more in line with what we're saying went to assets and infrastructure rather than this forum. Would that be a better, more appropriate forum for it?
probably.
Through the chair, we're happy to put a paper to assets and infrastructure with that detailed split around council cost per project and NZTA share per project, if that's what the committee would like us to do. No problem.
Kia ora. Welcome to those listening. My question in regards to following from Councillor Thompson's request, is it worth then going into a detail around splitting those, not just council and central as such, but I was thinking from a rural urban space too. Is that data available? Often people do ask around how much city ratepayers pay into as to rural, etc. So David, Mr. Wilson, is it okay to ask for some data in that information paper to that query as far as our roading network, so that people have an intel of what they're paying towards regional roads?
So through the chair, we can update you on the split between the ratepayers and how the roading funding comes together. We can do that. I would remind the committee that in the first year of the long-term plan, the Finance and Assets Committee have proposed to look at the rates component, what rates go where, the splits and where those things fit. So that is a piece of work that that committee is looking to pick up, but I'm happy to report that back, but just flagging that it would be done through a different committee than this one.
Any further discussion or questions? If not, we move to page 20. Draft proposed regional public transport plan. I trust you would have all read it. I guess you will have some questions. And who is it, Dave, or who's going to, you're going to respond to it?
Have you moved the regional plan transport plan? Has it been voted on special?
Yeah, I think we had it. We voted on it. I'm not that stupid. Any questions? Page?
Yeah, I'm just jumping to that other document, sorry. It was about the amount of money applied to bus shelters. I just can't see the detail. I haven't got the detail, but if I remember right, it was the amount that was applied for the bus shelters didn't seem to, I think it was only 15,000. 18,000, which I don't would only really build 1.5. I don't know. I just don't. Yeah, just a query.
Just to confirm that the existing roading budget has 15,000, and what we're proposing is next year, for the next 3 years, will stay at that same 18,000. So it's a small increase, but it's a slight increase, but it's not a dramatic increase. It's just to manage the other parts of the budget as well.
No questions? Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question about the fare box recovery project, because I have read through it and I see earlier in the document it talked about an opportunity that we made to change the way we collect funds, but that the time has passed. If you look at page 44, it talks about percentage of fare box recovery, and currently we're down at 32. And if we're to lift it to the level that's been recommended, it does seem to be a reasonably substantial increase. When you look at, we've dropped from a collection of 46% down to 32% over 7 years, and now we're going to need to lift it. The point in this paper is well made that either it is an increase in a fare or it is a substantial increase in patronage. And it's not that long ago that we had quite a serious review and sought guidance from the community. So what are we going to do differently in the review of meeting the needs of our user community so that we do get an increase in patronage? Have we any thoughts on that yet?
So through the chair, one of the key things is part of that 2018 work program around what we do to either look at the fares that we're charging or to boost patronage, which of course would be all of our preference, is to get more people using the buses so that we have a better offset of the costs that are there. We know that there's some challenges in the way that people use the system, and the lack of having a smart card or the like to be able to tag on and tag off buses is something that we know annoys people, as does the route and the way that we're looking to do that. So part of that early 2018 review is to look at some of those ways to lift the patronage is our preference, and then making sure that that feeds through into what the service looks like when we roll the contracts out to try and boost that up. Part of the subsidy that, of course, we're getting for the Kaiti Kids community is within the RLTP, so that's the Kaiti School Bus Initiative, as it was formerly known, around getting kids over to the high school. So we are looking to increase patronage on those routes where possible, but a lot of it's going to come down to some of the operational components of the bus service, and those are the things that the team needs time to work through and, be honest, plagiarise from other areas that are doing these things well, roll them out here so that we can try and get more people onto our public transport system.
Thank you. Supplementary then, if I may, on page 23 in the actual report, it talks at some length in 10 and 11 about the opportunity to join the consortium with respect to integrated ticketing systems. Now, we did put a lot of effort into looking at appropriate routes, and we sought consultation, and then I do recall there was feedback after the new route was put in place that didn't meet the needs of those who were seeking to travel to work. So did we miss an opportunity in allowing this fare box recovery or the integrated ticketing system to lapse, or was it merely, and I can well understand if it was, that Gisborne District Council was strapped for cash and we couldn't afford to go into yet another costly exercise? So what happened there?
So through the chair, the standalone system that we're looking to implement, the timing was wrong for where our contracts were coming up as opposed to where the other councils were going as to when our contract comes up for tender and how we were going to look to roll that out. So the timing didn't work for what we were trying to achieve, and the system that was being proposed was bigger than what we would have had budget for to be able to implement.
Further discussion or questions?
Through the chair, can we just look at page 36 and being access and mobility, I feel bound to ask these questions. Around the wheelchair access, it says that school and urban services are and will continue to be wheelchair and mobility frame accessible. Can you just tell me what you define as accessible? And my specific question, I guess, is could someone using a wheelchair get on and off our buses independently?
Through the chair, what we've done is we've two phases of work where our bus drivers are usually the first one who give us the first issues. They said these are problem areas that they've noticed people having difficulties getting onto the buses. So those are the ones we've been targeting. And then if this next phase of work goes, or the budget goes through, then we'll be able to increase that. So it is based on feedback we're getting from the drivers is our priority focus.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'd want to say then that if they were accessible, you'd likely get more patronage from people who needed accessibility, because if they try to get on it and can't, they're not coming back. So there's that. And the other thing is the total mobility scheme is currently not working, not at all. Is that what this report says? You haven't got a provider? Is it?
Through the chair, we do have providers, but the amount of uptake of people wanting to do that, the rules we've got are quite specific, and some of the people who have applied, they're not eligible. Unfortunately, it's just yeah. And one of the examples, I suppose, not like that, is like the yellow bus you'll see, and it's just some of them prefer to keep their companies, their accounts, so they can access other funding opportunities.
Sure. Thank you. I don't want to take away from what the yellow buses do in this community. It's a fantastic service, and we'd be in big trouble without them. I guess I think the report does acknowledge that cost is a fact for the total mobility scheme. I wonder if there's any philanthropic funding that can go to further subsidise that scheme, because while the Sunshine Service is, in my view, essential in this community, it runs Monday to Friday between business hours. So, you know, if I have a disability and I want to go to the pub, I can't. If I want to go out at the weekend, or too bad. So I just wonder if operationally something could be looked at around getting extra funds to further subsidise, to top up what is the national funding for that total mobility.
Any further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, thanks so much for this report. It's pretty comprehensive, etc. Lots in it. But I just, with regard to the route framework, one of the key issues feedback-wise from the community is Three Rivers Medical Centre, patronage of that space, people having access to it. And I just, in the speak to, you know, discussing the routes and change, I'd just like consideration to access points for medical, I guess, spaces where the public have appointments, and generally we see a large number, sadly, of missed appointments through the health sector. So can that be a consideration? And I just want to do a thank you shout out to Dave and the team for the bus shelters. One of them, which has been long wished for in the Kaiti suburb there. You know, it's been great to be a part of that project and see it come to fruition. There are schools in other parts of the region asking for bus shelters. I've kind of, you know, engaged a bit of Ministry of Education's role in this, because they are school spaces where we're seeing an uptake of trucks and other high performance type vehicles in these places, and schools are requesting, you know, bus shelter spaces on site or close by. And I don't know if that'll rise as far as being asked or requested for, but I certainly know there's been some queries to that. And lastly, just within the strategic space of our transport system, how well promoted as far as social media is it? So those were just my three thoughts. Thanks, Mr. Wilson.
So through the chair, we'll take those suggestions on board as we look to roll out any change to the bus routes. It'll be something that we would bring back through and be wanting to workshop with this committee and the wider community around feedback of where those routes should be before we do anything around changing the routes through the new contract that we put out. The bus shelters are something that we know, and as Dave said, we have increased the budget slightly for the bus shelters going forward, and it's something that we're keen to work with the schools with if there is inadequate provision. It is difficult for us when it is the school that hasn't made provision for their students. More than happy to talk from the Ministry of Education about that. We're happy to take the feedback as it comes out and for what it is that we're going to do once we get into that public transport space. Regarding advertising and making it more aware of around our routes, that's definitely something, particularly through social media, as we roll out the engagement for the new routes and the new service once we have that contract on board, that we'd be definitely looking to do.
Malcolm.
Through the chair, thanks, Mr. Chair. As an earlier question I asked out of order, I suppose, but now it might be the right time. I see in the RFSs that there was a few people complained about the poor bus driving carry on. So how bad was that? Because I mean, people getting onto public transport, surely they've got to feel safe. Is that a reason why people are using it less? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Through the chair, as far as I understand, that was an isolated incident. The bus drivers, and we've spoken to the company around the performance of their drivers, it is something that we're not aware of that we've seen a pattern of, or as a rationale for why people wouldn't choose to take our bus service.
Thank you. And supplementary, Mr. Chairman, have we really found out why the usage of our bus service is dwindling?
So through the chair, that's one of the things we want to work with our community to understand why patronage is going down. nationally across the country. It really does depend on where you are as to what those services are
Yep,
doing.
sure.
One of the things that we do know here in Tairāwhiti is we love our cars. A lot of people have more than 3 cars at their properties, it seems. So we have a lot of people who, and given the way that our town is laid out, the long way that it is and the nature of our hinterland, people are driving. So it is difficult to create a service that works for most people at a cost-effective way. Those are the things that we want to resolve and better understand with the community as we roll out any changes that we'd be looking to do next year.
Thanks.
Any further discussion? Questions? If not, would someone move the recommendations on page 21?
I'll move that.
Thank you. Second, I'll put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. That kind of brings us to the end of the agenda. However, I have I suppose, a surprise in one respect. I did ask the manager of Tairāwhiti Roads yesterday afternoon if he would give us an update, given that we have new contractors in place. And the last time we met, we were going through the drama of trying to put all that in place. Before I hand over to Dave, I just want to acknowledge the staff and the compilation of the agenda and the work they've done in putting this in front of us. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, just to follow up, I'd like to acknowledge the work the team have put to the RLTP. I mean, I used to do it, and you can see the lift in the performance of the documents you've got before you. So I just want to acknowledge Chris and Yannick. Well done, guys. Great effort. The chair asked me just to give you an update to some of the operational issues, mainly in the north. We've got, you'll probably see, certainly on State Highway 35, and when I'm in the northern area, that's from Wainui to Hicks Bay, you'll probably see several suppliers or several contractors on the network over the next two months. So the council and the State Highway rehab and resurfacing program is underway. It's carried out by about 3 different contractors. That's Fulton Hogan, Johnson Masters and Downer, so they're working on their way. They're, the final 1-lane section of State Highway 35, Cooperall Hill, that's Fulton Hogan are undertaking that. And you'll see there were some other reports we put into the Assets Committee about some of the State Highway rest areas and RFA. So that works, that resilience project's almost completed and planting's underway. Just with the western area, there's a couple sites open on State Highway 2, you've probably noticed that, but unfortunately the rain, we've been affected by rain. So that's a risk for us that we're concerned about. We just want to make sure those pavements dry out before we seal them, and we all know what's happening in the windows with rain coming in the next couple of weeks. Wainui Stage 2 is very close. We're close to awarding a contractor for that. The main focus for the team for the council roading network is Gladstone Road. We're looking at delivery starting that on the 5th of March. I know we promised the end of February, but it was just trying to make sure some of the designs is underway. So we'll start rolling out some communications with that. So, and people probably know about Barkers Hill and some of the streetlight information. Last but not least, we've also got one bridge which we're bringing up to HPMV, that's on Tauwhiriparo Road, about 47 k's. I suppose the main focal point, and I spoke to when the chair asked me to do this, is over the next 3 months, so certainly on the local roading network, to try and keep to our budgets, there's going to be a quite tightening, and we said maybe even I call it a less desirable view outside your window when you're driving. Some of the work sites, there'll be people may have to wait a lot longer for, we're going to have a lot of road works out there, but other parts, potentially some signs, road marking, vegetation may become a bit more obvious to people until we come into the next funding round. So we're, Tairāwhiti Roads in conjunction with, we're looking at putting a bit of a comms plan out to that, to say that we'll certainly start, instead of repairing isolated repairs, we'll be grouping them together. Okay, so customers may not to meet the budgets and to meet the efficiency between south and down. That's the program we will be looking at. So we'll start rolling out that comms plan. We're looking at probably the next couple of weeks, and that includes informing the Assets Committee and also including the Chief Executive's monthly newsletter and other events as well. But it's not all doom and gloom. We've actually got other parts which are coming underway as well. Obviously, there's some good work coming out there, but it's just more of a realisation it's going to be a bit tight between here until the end of June.
Thank you, Dave. I'll allow questions. The minutes.
Dave, the recent weather events, how we fared with that?
We've got off quite lightly. There was only actually one bridge that a family is stuck behind. It's at Moanui Road. So that's our number one priority at the moment. So Alex has gone up there we've got a family stuck behind it. They can't cross the bridge. And so he's up there seeing what they can do. But other than that, we got off quite lightly, very lightly. And that's on both networks.
The road surface with the continued logging?
Yes, because the road wasn't closed, the logging fraternity still carried on. So as I said, we were fortunate. The roading, we only had one road that was closed due to the rain event.
Okay. Dave. Oh. Malcolm.
Thank you. Through the chair, I missed a point earlier on, and I just want clarification from David, either Dave. And it was page 7 on .4, which says road safety educator is working with schools to set priorities for the implementation of the 40km/h speed restriction around them. Has something changed, or have I missed a space somewhere?
Just for clarification, my impression is that there's a report from GHD which Di's commission that will come back to the Assets Committee before there's any prioritisation, and that's to go over all the schools. The list of schools that was at the last report have fed into that, and so and from there they'll be prioritised. But there'll be no prioritisation or no work until that goes to the Assets and Infrastructure Committee first.
Thank you.
Okay, Dave's asked for 5 minutes, so here we are, Dave. Oh, nothing.
I might put Kate on the spot. So one of the things that we need to work through with you that I've just been reminded of by my staff is around our significance policy that we have. We need to identify in the RLTP which approach to prioritisation that we have taken, and this needs to be explicit from the Regional Transport Committee. So apologies for my oversight on this. And it's around the projects that you have prioritised in the RLTP. So there are 2 ways for us to look at when we prioritise projects through the RLTP. And Helen, you're able to magically make that PowerPoint appear behind me? Oh, thank you, Heather. And it's around how we prioritise the projects. So as you can see behind me, the RLTP must contain an order of significant activities. And you have to give us the guidance. As we talked about before, you've accepted the policy for what sits in through here, through our significance policy. The part that we're looking to carry on further with is which approach we should do when we rank when we rank projects. And there are 2 different approaches that can be done here. So there's the NZTA approach, and I don't mean to call it the NZTA approach, but it's the IAF, and it's easier if I just call it the NZTA because it never. So always. So the IAF approach is where we look at the cost benefit approach for when we're going to adopt a project and when we do the ranking for that. The other one is to take a Regional Transport Committee assessment, and that is where it looks at the regional priorities, which you discussed and you know as this is your region, and then align those to the strategic direction in your RLTP. So it's more focused on the RLTP priorities as opposed to the business case priorities. So I'll just quickly flick through what these are and give you the rankings for what it is. Now, this was contained right down in the detail of the Regional Land Transport Plan. So this is where they would be around those priority projects that are in the back of the RLTP there. And the ones that you can see that came through, number 1 was the Eastland Port Access Project and the East Cape Bluff Stabilisation. And those are both projects that I'm sure you know well. So then it goes down through the Gisborne Network Optimisation for 2 and 3, the Inner Harbours number 4, the LEDs is 5, 6 is our State Highway 35 program business case, and 7 is the way right. And that's how it would be when you look at it through the lens of the IAF project ranking. So that's where they've come out. If you do them through the RLTP strategic direction, so look at it from the RLTP way of doing it, you see there's a difference. So the Inner Harbour and Tarahiru receive higher rankings in this process than the State Highway 2 and the State Highway 35. And I'll show you it on this slide here. So as you can see, ranks 1, 2, 3 are exactly the same. Where it starts to change is that if we look at the IAF rating, it hits at 4 in the IAF, and yet it comes through as, I can't even see it there, that's dropped off. 2, sorry, it's in the Inner Harbour there. So they change the way that they work in that case there. What we need to know is which approach it is that the Regional Transport Committee would like us to take when it comes to the prioritisation process going forward. So the IAF very much driven by the business case approach and looking at how we're going to prioritise projects. The Regional Land Transport goes back to the objective settings that we do through the Regional Land Transport Plan. And it really is up to the committee which one of those you'd like us to apply when we look at ranking projects as they come in or out of the RLTP.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we at some meeting in the past agree to each project had to have a business case that's stacked up? Or have I got it wrong?
No, so through the chair, that's one of the things that this committee has said, that business cases, and of course it is part of the New Zealand Transport Agency funding criteria that we have a better business case approved before we can even enter anything into the NZTA system. So it is something that we do have to have, and it would be something that we would be looking to develop up for any project that we put through, because we have to be able to tick the boxes before anything's able to achieve any funding.
Comment? Yes.
Can, like, in some occasions, oh, look at that on yet. Yep. So on some instances, one method might give a outcome we prefer better than the other one, and the other way around it might be another way. You know, like, so do we actually have to have a prioritisation methodology that is fixed rather than say, hey, well, this is where we are, have a run through it. Where do you think we are? Like,
so through the chair, we have to pick a process to make sure that we're not able to change it as projects come through. It has to be apples with apples. We can't have a different process for assessing them as they come through.
Supplementary, and this is a bit of what I was talking about before, and I still haven't said, I didn't articulate it well. I can't, like, often when there's a project that needs to be prioritised, there isn't a bigger kitty of funds, so it has to be taken from somewhere else, and that's another thing. You know, when we're doing these prioritisations, we need to have the big picture, and I know in the past we've approved funding to something as a priority, like a cycleway or something, and that has had a consequence somewhere else. But when we approved that, we weren't given that information.
So through the chair, this process is looking at what you'd like to do, whether it's the business case for when you make those decisions and when you prioritise, because as you say, for new projects coming into the RLTP, or for when we're looking at where we direct our funding, they need to be put through a matrix for you to be able to make your decision in and around that. So the two different ways, and I'm not sure if the table behind me is helping, given it's showing things that we may well want to jump to move, but the two ways of doing it are both robust. One compares it to a business case process that is looked at through the IAF, so the lens goes through that. The other one, it goes back to your strategic direction that you have in the Regional Land Transport Plan. So if you'd like to compare to other councils, it's Hawke's Bay, for example. They've taken theirs for regional significance. So they've done theirs through the Regional Transport Committee priority, and they've moved it up to look at what's regionally significant for them. And that's their way of them being able to do it. And a couple of other councils have as well. So it's how you would like to be able to do that and which lens you'd like to put over it as an RTC. It's up to yourselves.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to say that I'm sure everyone would have varying views. By the time I'd finished listening to Mr. Wilson, and I think that regional significance would be the preferred way, but I was going to suggest that really start with a recommendation, because at the end of the day, they are going to be working with it. They have a feel for this region, and I think that might be helpful, but I'm surely that would consider regional significance.
Sorry.
Which one do you recommend to start?
Taking the lead as well, I understand that is there a funding consequence to the left column, and on the right is obviously the regional drivers. I guess I would consider the funding consequences if there are any.
Can I ask, do we not put a lot of effort into determining the regional priorities? So isn't it logical that having put the time into the process of determining regional priorities, shouldn't that be the driver for the other decisions rather than imposing a different process on top?
Should there be a decision on one or the other, or a combination of both?
We need a decision for this meeting.
Well, you heard the advisor. We need a decision today. Is it a combination of two or one or the other? I'm quite happy
through the
with
chair,
that.
if I can, to clarify for the committee, you do put a lot of time and effort into your objectives for your regional transport, and it is something that if your strategic direction you have set, and if that's something that you want to guide our investment decisions, then we're happy for us to take that forward. If you want it to be a funding-based decision, then the IAF is the way for us to go forward. We do need a decision one way or another on these, and that's what we're looking for from the committee.
Through the chair, I didn't understand what or hear what Kata was saying. Could we have her recommendation, please?
Kia ora. Thank you for that. I guess to clarify, the decision fundamentally sits with you, and I guess to reaffirm the advice you've been given, I guess from Dave and myself, the regional priorities you've determined in your RLTP that is going out for draft consultation. Another factor to consider is the funding, and will that be affected by that choice? Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, I understand the left has funding implications, so it could be more on the left. So the decision is with you.
I'll cut straight to the chase for the committee. I would recommend as staff that you take the RLTP strategic direction ranking as the way forward. This committee is very passionate about the region and for getting regional funding around your priorities that you have set. So for the committee, if you want to continue in that process around the regional priorities and having that as the lens that you would like us to put over them, that would be the one that you want to choose.
Someone will move accordingly.
Oh, yeah, I'll totally move that.
I
I
was
was just
thinking
going to say that.
in your names there.
I know.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, kia ora, thanks, Dave, for that. Yeah, I must admit, in reading through this paper on page 6, I was heartened with the strengths of the regional benefits model statement in there. And I think this is our chance as an RTC to stand by our region's priorities, because we live here. We love this place, as you've mentioned, Mr. Wilson. I guess for me, I look at that and think about the impact into future young people, invest, their legacy we leave. And whilst I appreciate funding and money is important in this whole space, I think as a region, we're starting to see we need to be really strong on our approach to all modes of transport in this region. As you know, I'm passionate about rail, but also for cyclists getting to and from school. So when I look at that left, the side that's indicative of the RLTP, I'm definitely more heartened in that space for our region, but certainly don't, want to belittle the notion of funding and such. But I think today, if we make that decision, we have to stand by it and be happy that we're moving for our region's best forward. And we're partnering with some wonderful people who are helping us as well. So that's my kōrero to this kaupapa. Kia ora.
So I take from that, you'll move that the regional priorities be right.
I will.
Councillor McLean, you second. No further moves? I'll put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. The contrary, carried. Do we have any further business? Well, thank you very much for your attendance and for staff's input. Meeting closed.